What up, everyone? This is Beau Douglas. You're here for the 3 Count podcast. I am your 400th guest. Take it away, Cliff. Let's see what's going on.
Do you want to get live with me? Do you really want to ride with me? I'm in the club, baby, grind on me.
Welcome, everyone, to another great edition of the 400th. Sorry, This is the 3 Count podcast, now entering, and I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. And with it being season 5 and our 400th episode, it's never about me. It's about who's entering. Because like every great Sherpa, which I like to think I am, like I said, it's about the man who is coming on the show. So, who's coming on the show? Well, you can find this person at BWA, UFO, LIT. You can find him at TRP, TOS, NWWE, NCW, PAPW, BTW, LPW. He is back home. He is the dynasty. He is Beau Douglas. Yeah.
Man, thanks for having me.
Oh man, I was so hyped because like when we were talking about this, I was like, of course, it's just gonna make sense to have 400th episode. We're up here, and I get to have a chat with you and sit down. And what's funny? Like the first time I met you at BWA, I was mad intimidated because I was like, oh god, like here's this guy. Like I've heard legends. Like I'm like meeting him for the first time, so I was a little nervous. And then like the second time I met you, you were just like really down to earth and you're talking to me and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, this is a guy that I could like low key kick it with on any other weekend that I want.
Just a real guy, man. That's all I can do. I've always been one of the best things you can be is real to people. And, I put out that energy that I want back to me. So hopefully that does inspire people to keep it real as much as they can. It is pro wrestling. We know how that goes and we know how people can be, but I appreciate you, Cliff. And honestly, you just spit some facts about me that like, wow. Wow. You're putting me up here though. Let's just keep it right level. You know what I mean? Let's just here for time.
I was like, well, it's to be said. It's 20 years in the game though, right? 27, 28 years in the game. And it's like, here you are still plugging away, still doing a thing. And like, you come from a prestige line of trainers, right? Let's be real. Like Killer Kowalski is no joke. Like, and people who are in the New England area understand that too. And then of course across the United States, people who pay attention to WWE or WWF or WWF, right? They kind of understand like, oh wow, like this, we're talking lineages here, and it's to you like what I like is like the fact that you're able to just you break down wrestling and then you talk about like you break it down to like its simplest form, and then you build on top of it. So you have all these great students who have these great bases, and then you keep inspiring and instilling, like, keep striving and keep looking and keep growing in the industry.
I appreciate it. You have to keep going. You have to keep growing too. I was taught very, very early on that if once you stop learning, then what are you doing, right? So like, I'm always learning new things. I'm always watching new things. I'm always trying to pay attention, but the fundamentals are the fundamentals, plain and simple. There's flavors of ice cream. There's options. There's different ways of training, but in reality, like I said, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. There's so many different styles of pro wrestling. But if you dig deep enough, you're going to see that the fundamentals are always the same. But that's the thing too. Like when we talk about fundamentals, I like to build on them. I like to see people grow. I like to see people do things that we haven't necessarily seen before. That's the flavor. You add a little spice to it, right? you gotta sweeten the pot a little. You got to make sure that things look crisp, but also are more so attracting than you would have already seen before. You don't want to go out there. You don't want to see a wrestling show where every single match is the same, right? Like that's just silly. That's silly. Honestly, where'd we come from? We came from the carnivals, right? We came from the circus. That's where pro wrestling came from, right? Talk about the circus. Talk about 7-ring circus. That means in each ring you have a different type of what's the word I'm saying? Attraction.
Yeah.
you're going to see a different attraction or a different form of entertainment. Now, obviously, we want to keep all this entertainment and competition, so to speak, in the realm of pro wrestling. So that's why people say, "Oh, you're old school. Oh, you're this." No, not. I consider old school a fundamental.
Right.
That's fundamental. And when I say build on it and add that spice, that's the different styles, right? Yeah, you have that Japanese strong style, the Parisian, if I'm pronouncing it right. You got Lucha Libre. You got the hard hitting your like catch as catch can European style that still takes place. Up in Canada, there's so many mixes of styles. I mean, talk about Lance Storm School. I mean, that's just something you see. There is a space on the card for every different style. That's just my own opinion. I mean, I'm for death matches. I mean, I wouldn't want to do a death match this late in my career. But that being said, I do feel like it does draw a specific type of crowd. You talk about my students. I mean, I've trained a bunch of people. I mean, I did a couple dozen people that are out there. I don't like name dropping. I'll let you do all that. But I am a trainer at the Belton Club. I did train under Killer Kowalski. I had a very unique opportunity being able to start at a very young age alongside one of my best friends, Slick Wagner Brown. And we've come all this way 28 years later, you know. Yikes, almost 29.
It was funny because I had Slick actually on the show when it was his 25 year in the business.
Oh,
and really, actually, I just said it was you guys have paid attention to these episodes. Like a few episodes ago, we have another show. It's called Now Entering 201. I actually brought Slick back on the show, and we just had a secondary conversation. I feel like he was in the mall or something like that, but it was fun regardless. We had a blast talking.
You're talking about 201. He's 617. I don't want to hear that nonsense.
But it was just what was so fun was that and it's just something that like getting to chat with you about. It's just the idea that like, yeah, everything is from the basics. And I very much believe, you know, I was a military member, you know, so and I always tell people like I'm a grunt. So like the basics are the basics and you build on top of that. But one of the parts I always tell people too is like you can't have fun without fundamentals, man. So like if you don't have the fundamentals, like you're gonna do something stupid. And I just recently I was asked recently to help bring a person on the podcast, and they sent me some at their match footage, and I was like, I can't bring you on, bro. Like I clearly see where you are, and I was like that, and that's like I'm not trying to come at it in a negative sense, man, but it's a thing where you can tell like certain people's training and where they were, and I was like, and you clearly have never seen training at all, like, and I'm worried about that. Like I'm not trying to say like this show holds a certain prestige, but you know we've done enough of these episodes with people who have gone through different schools, right? Whether they were trained by the Santino Bros in Los Angeles, trained by yourself, right? Slick Wagner Brown, my trainer who is Sicken out of Sykesville, Maryland, Ruckus, right? Like there's a lot of and Amazing Red and all these guys who would like come out and train. AR Fox. Now I'm still thinking of other names, like big, like you know, big trainer names. And it's like, yo, but if you're coming on the podcast and you're like, yeah, I wasn't trained, I just came up on my own. Like, no, bro, you can go sit on your own somewhere else because, like, it's again having someone teach you the basics is so important.
There's so much more than fundamentals that you learn at a wrestling school. You know this. Anybody that's wrestled or done training or been trained properly knows that there's so much more than just learning how to wrestle. You got to do good business inside and outside the ring. That's like number one. And that's why I keep it real all the time. That I consider if I'm keeping it real, you can't hold anything against me. Or if you do, that's on you. That's not a business decision. That's just on you. Not you, of course, but in general. I mean, you can hold whatever you want against me if that's how you feel, Cliff. Or we can settle it in the ring. Anyways.
Always.
There we go. I know where there's a ring. It's not far from my place.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. The fundamentals is so much more than just moves. I mean, that's just the way I got to put it. That's the way I have to say it. it's how you present yourself. It's how you relate. It's how you communicate. It's how, I mean, I don't want to knock anyone. I'm gonna say that first and foremost. Like I said, I was given a great opportunity by Killer Kowalski to be able to start at 17 years old, right? I was able to watch for 2 years prior to that, at 15 to 17. And of course, he got sick of me just being there for free and wanted us to train. It was a good time. Great time, actually. But that being said, I feel like he gave me an opportunity to chase a dream, right? So one of the reasons I train people, or I don't even want to say train people, I coach people, or train, however you feel. But I coach them in the direction that I feel they should go, and where they want to go, for that matter. If you want to be a weekend warrior on the indies and putting in the work as a carpenter, then do that. I'm down. If you want to make it to the next level, we're going to take your training to a different level. We're going to do a different focus after your fundamentals are all locked in, right? But there have been people that are at an older age. I mean, I'm 44 now, so we'll just say at an age closer to mine than where I was when I first started. That do want to chase their dream, right? So they want to come in, they want to train. I'm going to give them that opportunity. Now, the fact is, not everyone makes it through. And yes, wrestling's for everyone, but everyone's not really for wrestling. And they realize that, I want to say, pretty quickly once they're there. I don't know. Again, I don't want to knock people for doing what they feel is the right path for themselves, because where I do have different focuses when we do coaching and training. But I do feel it's a detriment to the business that there's so many people out there that aren't trained, or as they consider themselves, seminar trained, or hey, I worked out with my buddy who has his own ring in his backyard and he taught me how to do things. I'm not saying it's backyard wrestling. I don't knock backyard wrestling, but when it crosses over into the professional side, or the professional side of the independents, not shindy, which many of us have done and are part of as well at times, it's okay. You're getting exposure and experience, right? But I feel like it hurts the business as a whole. Yeah. You see people who go out there, you see people who put their neck on the line. They've done this. They've put in so much time. They've dedicated, invested, lived, lost so much in their lives. And then you see these kids, oh, I'm just going to do this fun and I'm not going to train. And then they are the ones that are out there and the opponent gets hurt, right? I'm not going to say how, not going to say why. Everyone in the end knows. Everyone on the outside should understand. If you need surgery, are you going to go to your buddy who knows how to play that little electronic game Operation, or are you going to go to an actual surgeon? I mean, that's something you can think of on your own.
I like that analogy, and that's something that so it's fun fact. That's the first time I've heard it. So I like that analogy a lot, because I see it a lot where I'm like, I worry because like there's these kids who are doing these moves and trying to do something, and something can be simple, like throw a clothesline, and then you see the person fall like on their hip and then just like lay there. And I'm like, yeah, that hurts a lot because it's not what you're supposed to be doing. Again, it goes back to learning the basics and stuff. And I think what my trainer did too, like he ran me through all the basics and stuff like that. And what I ended up learning a lot too was not just like properly falling, it was something that he taught me. Obviously, we talk about structure, and if you guys want to, actually, we're not gonna talk about here. You guys can go look that up, because that was something I had to go out and get my own knowledge. And Google is out there, so you guys can do it.
Are you referring to like mat structure, yeah, or like psychology?
Yeah. Yes, both.
Okay. I just wasn't sure where we were.
Yeah. No.
But you're right. So many places don't even teach it.
Yeah.
They don't teach it either on top of it. So that makes it a whole different, like, that's a whole different road. Sorry.
Yeah, so when I showed up to so what's funny is I showed up to my trainer, it was the first week of January in 2020. And I was like, I told you I'd be here. He didn't really believe me. He thought I was just playing around. I showed up, started learning how to take bumps right away. And I had been, don't knock backyard wrestling because I had also played in the dark arts, is what I like to call it. And then I wanted to get trained professionally. And so I started training, and then I remember the second week that I had showed up, there was like 40 kids that also were like training. And I was like, yo, I exaggerate. It's 20. All right, it's 20.
Okay.
We got pictures with everybody. But what was funny was I was there, and then the next week, out of the 20 kids, 5 of them had stayed. And then in the third week, it was me again. So I was like, yo, we're here. It's what it is. And I knew what I was signing up for. I was ready for all of it. So I was like, yo, we're gonna take beatings and stuff like that. Like, I'm not talking about beatings.
A lot of people don't know what they sign up for. They really don't. They think they do, but they don't. They don't. And you're a true testament to that. And I mean, that's why when you asked me, I wanted to do everything I could to make sure I got on, right? I wanted to make sure that I was here with you because I do feel like that you are doing everything you can to help better the business as well. And I mean, even this podcast, 400 episodes, I mean, geez, that's better in the business, right? So I want to because that's what we're supposed to do, right? Supposed to leave the business better off than when we got into it. And that's what I'm trying.
And that's where I thought about it too. Like, I understand. Listen, like you were talking about, you're 44. I'm turning 40 in September next year, and I think about it. I think about the same thing. Where I was like, yo, if I only had a place where I could go and I could listen to 2 people have a conversation about the business or just about wrestling in general, and I could find someone like that was a gear maker or someone that did merch or someone that helped design gear, not just made them. If I could find all these things and bring it into one area, like, man, how cool would it be to be treating this like a college course?
Yeah, like a full course. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I know there's a couple places in New York actually that do have something very similar, like what you're talking about. I believe, was it the HOG school at one point in time that had Yolanda, the designer there? Mm-hmm. Shout out. Amazing work. And of course, I know Gabe Sapolsky was doing a lot of his seminars out there before. I mean, I hate name dropping, like I said. I just know that those are things that can be attained. I mean, we keep on seeing it, to be honest, too. We see it everywhere. I mean, with this little WWE ID thing that's going on right now. I say little. It's a pretty big deal.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but you're seeing more of these dojos and schools. They are kind of following along the path of trying to become training centers, right?
Yeah.
Training center is just like you said. It's a business. It's a location where you can go. You can train. I mean, up in Wakefield, Massachusetts, when I first took over the Belltime Club and I continued it on from my former partner, Jason Rubble. He's retired up in Maine, living his life with his family. Shout out Boston Bad Boy. But what I will say is that we continued it on now 13 years later, 14 years later, and after we moved, our training center did become more so just like a little mini dojo. And now that we've moved again, I've shifted the focus more so to personal training and focusing that the Belltime Club personal training program instead, where we will be traveling around. I mean, I hope to, of course, be able to go to any location that is available. If you'd like to have me down, obviously, let me know. But currently we are running classes Tuesdays and Thursdays. But with the new year, things might be changing up. So don't hold me to the schedule at this point, and we'll see where things go.
No, and you bring up a good point, because there's something that I've talked with, like, I also don't like to name drop. People can just go find the episodes, but O'Shea Edwards and I were talking one time, and the magic number that he had mentioned to me was 225. That's what he had said. When it comes to squatting and benching and deadlifting, 225 is the number. And the reason why is because the average wrestler on the indie scene usually weighs about 200 pounds. So you should be able to hold your own body weight up. And when I look at it, I'm like, all right, with 200 pounds, average wrestler probably about anywhere between 5'10" and 6 foot, right? You should. That's a great number to pick at, right? 225. And so, I thought about that, and then that's what got me to think about personal training. Well, I became a personal trainer because I wanted to help people better their lives. But then when I got to think about like the wrestling industry, I see a lot of wrestlers, and I'm like, yo, like you talk about main eventing at WrestleMania, but I don't want to sound bitter or sound down about it, but you're 145 pounds and you're like a twig, bro. Like I want to be able to help you put some meat on them bones and like present yourself like a wrestler because Rey Mysterio is a perfect example of an anomaly, right? Here's a guy who's 5'9", and when he started in the business was like 150 pounds, but when you see him now, he's 190, like, and he still moves really well in the business. And for being 35 plus years in the business, like, this is a perfect dude to talk about. Amazing Red, we talk about House of Glory, like,
Amazing.
yeah.
No pun.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he's got some thickness to him, like there's not these guys who are like, sticked out, and you're just like, well, we want to help build you. So when you talk about lifting in a gym and stuff like that, or lift and making a performance center, like that's the idea, was like, we want to make people stronger and then look like a wrestler, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to say it.
That's one of the many like courses you would focus towards, right? Like, so it would be the personal training aspect. Now me, I agree 100%. I feel like you should look like either you could fight or that you can handle yourself in the ring. Yeah. There are the exceptions to rules. We talked about keeping it real at the very beginning of this. As you know, I'm not this big gym buff, right? And that was one of my weaknesses for these 27 years. I mean, and when I say weaknesses, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I didn't have that look. I wasn't putting in as much time in the gym as nearly I should have. Never mind the fact that, I want to be on the next level. I want to go to the next stage. It's something you realize after the fact, but also you want to do things your own way. But that's what I tell all my students too. That's why I keep my classes to about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, because I'm not there. I mean, I'm going to teach you ring conditioning. I'm going to help you with ring conditioning, but I'm not there to build your body. I'm there to teach you to wrestle. Well, I'm there to teach you to pro wrestle. And you know what I mean by that. And a lot of people out there do as well. And I mean, I want you to be safe. I want to make sure that you're able to go home to your family if you have a family. I want to make sure at the end of the night that you're able to wake up the next morning, and if you have a job, go to that job. I don't want people to risk their livelihoods or their well-being just based off the fact that they are going to chase their dream. Again, I went 25 years without a severe injury, and that's when my back went. But 25 years, and that's because we were trained correctly. Yeah. I don't even know if my back would have even went if I had put more effort into the gym. But again, my focus ended up being more character work. It became promo direction. It became acting. It became, I mean, I've done films. I'm not going to put myself over too much. I mean, I've done many films. I've auditioned for films. I've done extra work. But also I've done theater, and it's a love and a passion of mine as well. And it's all about performance. And I'm sure you understand that. And everyone who's watching most likely understands it as well. And that's something that gets left out of the mix when it comes to a lot of schools as well. So yes, I do feel, and that, honestly, let me just fix that with Belltime Club. We have had many great trainers alongside of me and coaches who do focus a lot on the body, on the building. But what I'll say is Belltime Club students are no more so for being safe and competent.
You bring up an excellent point too, aside from, like, I guess I don't want to say just one, but you bring up several great points, but one point in particular.
I'm sorry. Shut me down.
No, you're great. You bring up the theater aspect of it, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people forget, is that, like, sure, like when you see me like outside, like, it's usually kind of more tamed down energy. And I think of myself like here, I'm like a little level higher when it comes to like being like energy wise, because like I want to be up for the podcast. Yeah, I want to, obviously I want to give you guys everything I've got. But then when you see me in a ring, it's like it's another level up, and it's all based off character. Like I think of Red Dog as like this mercenary who cracks jokes and is just very high energy, and kind of like a Deadpool meeting the wrestling world is what I refer to it as. And there have been times where like I'll shift and play around with it and take it more seriously, but like, or I call it variance because that's what the MCU calls it now, different
Sure
timelines,
though.
different variants.
Mhm.
So I like to build a world up around Red Dog of like, well, what if Red Dog was like, oh, he was a mercenary, but he lived in California and he was more like closer to like a hip hop type. So like there's like a West Coast variant of Red Dog. There's like the funny side, and there's like the overly serious side of like Red Dog. And I love building up those worlds and thinking about like what would this Red Dog do differently than set Red Dog from this universe or that universe, or what would you do if this happened? So and then creates this whole alter ego that I get to play in different settings.
That's the best thing about independent wrestling. You can play with your variants and learn which one works the best, and then of course you can always find out that they all work really well. And there's your hybrid. There's the switch, right? That's when it starts clicking. That's when people start identifying that's the best. I mean, that's what they say about a character work and gimmicks, so to speak, is the best gimmicks and character work is based off of your original personality.
Yeah.
Turned up to 10,000, right? You gotta crank that stuff up. You gotta put it to max. You gotta go over max, maybe blow them speakers out. I'm talking about hip hop, right? So that popped in my head. To be honest, too, like one of the best things you could have just described when it came to your character is that basic description. You have to keep it as simple and understandable for the people that are watching you at home.
Yeah.
The best way to do it. It doesn't have to be a simple character, so to speak. You could be a solutional technician. You could be anything. It just has to be relayed to the crowd simply. You have to be able to do it in any show within the first 5 seconds of as soon as you walk through the curtain. I mean, honestly, because if you think of independent wrestling, if you think of wrestling in general, you got to go out there and yes, a portion of the crowd has been there multiple times, but you're hoping that a lot of the crowd has never been there.
Right.
You want to grow a crowd, right? You want to draw a house, right? So taking your character and mixing it up like that, people would never even know that it's a hybrid in the end. If you think about it. Well, I mean, you're a little different here with the podcast and everyone knows who you are, you know what I mean? But if I'm talking about the younger wrestlers or people coming out right now, that's something they should definitely think of. Stop going out there expecting everyone to know every single thing you've ever done or what your special move is, or, you know, unless it's been conditioned in the first place, go out there and have a blast. Act like it's something you have never done before, meaning wrestle in front of that specific crowd. Make them invest in you and come back the next time so you don't have to work aside.
Well, like, so it's funny because I brought this conversation up with a friend of mine. I told him that I was like, you know, he had wrestled at an area and he was really over in that area. And he went to a whole different promotion and he came out and he was like, same way, same thing. And just, it wasn't the same reaction. And I was like, you have to treat every crowd like it's the first time they saw you. Yep. Even if you're well familiar in your hometown and you're like the quote unquote hometown hero or hometown legend, like you have to treat the crowd like it's the first time they see you and give them everything right off the rip, because if not, they're not really getting anything from you. They're just like, oh, okay, well, here's this dude who would just like, you know, he just came out, said something, and we're supposed to cheer with that or not. So like anytime I pop through a curtain, I'm like, yo, it's usually high energy. Usually I say some random ass shit that comes to my mind and the crowd gets behind me, and then or I go through a high five people, you know, because I want them to know like, oh, I'm the baby face today, let's go. Or if I'm not, if I'm usually in, you know, sorry for those pulling the curtain back, if I'm usually the bad guy, I'll walk out and I look at the first kid and I'm like, that kid is definitely adopted, and just keep walking on. Like I find a reason for the crowd to boo me because I want it. So
you know, a lot of the old timers would say that's cheap heat, brother.
Yeah,
gotta be careful with that one.
100%.
But you're not wrong. You're not wrong in the sense that you have to do something. You know what I mean? You have to put that effort in. Yeah. I mean, there's only a certain percentage of people that are born with natural charisma. There's only a certain percentage of people that can go out there and just captivate a crowd just by stepping through the curtain. And that's not even something that can be necessarily taught, but you can teach people how to capture the attention of individuals. And once you get one person, I mean, if you think about it, you know this as well as I am, as I do for that matter. Things are super contagious, right? You see a couple fans that are buying into something, you're going to now pay attention to what those fans are doing, right? Because you're like, what the heck are they interested in, right? So now that's going to make you interested in the person that's making them act that way. It's action reaction. That's what it is. It's life. It's energy. We're just shifting energies and we're moving energy. And that's the exact same thing you do when you go out through that curtain. And what you said, that cheap heat, so to speak. Again, pull back the curtain. Thanks. That cheap heat. I mean, sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's needed, but experience changes that, and you'll see that as more and more time goes. I'm sure you've already seen it yourself.
Yeah. I just think about it, we're in the aspect of like even cheap heat will start blazes, and that's where like I kind of get to thinking about, like, I remember one time like there was a lady, and we were getting booed like bad. Me and my friends were, and this lady was like, "Your boy's looking a little frail." And to be fair, Chaz, you're a skinny guy. So I was like, "Well, go ahead and spell that word for me." And she's like, "What?" It's like, "Go on, spell frail." And she was like, FR, and then I just walked away from the conversation. And I was like, I'm over this. And she hated me, and then the rest of the crowd like started to follow her as I was like walk around. They were just booing me because at this point now I'm just like I could just say whatever, and people are mad.
I don't even know if that's cheap heat. I don't. I mean, I don't. That kind of was like handed to you on a silver platter, and wow, you just grabbed it. So that's like good instinct. I feel like you've done a lot of improv training.
You know what's crazy? It's usually because like off the cuff, like I always have like a bunch of random stuff that just like comes to mind.
Okay.
And one thing that, and so I'm grateful that I have my friend Chaz, who's the other half of this podcast, because we've talked back and forth about some stuff. But I've gone through a lot of different life experiences, and so things just kind of fall like naturally to me. If it sounds
No, I got it.
yeah.
I
Just fall. So I kind of understand, like, you know, it's
something from yourself right into what you're doing, into your.
yeah.
I mean, we're circling right back. We're circling right back to it, and you do it so well. That's why I said too, don't put so many people on big high pedestals, because you present yourself really well. I mean, don't be nervous when you're talking to people, especially someone like me. just go for it, man. Like 400 guests, 400 episodes. You're doing something right. You got to keep it.
And it goes back, and a lot of practice too. That has a lot of practice with this podcast. I definitely would say that this podcast has definitely helped me grow and become so comfortable with talking to people. Also, like, being a kid, like, and I share this with you guys too. This will be the first time I actually bring this up. The first 6 years of my life of going to school, I went to 6 different schools. Like, I was in Colorado and California and Panama City, Panama, and in Texas, and then back to Nebraska. So I've moved, and so I've been in different regions, and like had to learn how to think quick on my feet and figure stuff out. So for me, it just becomes, I guess for me, is I think of the whole world as a play anyway. So I'm just like, whatever, I'm just gonna have fun and say some random stuff and see what happens. And if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And we just take it to the drawing board, reassess the joke, and then go back out there and do it all over again some other time.
That's anything, and that's like anything in the entertainment industry. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. You have to try things, right? You're talking about the joke, right? You're just going out and you just got to rewrite a new joke, right? Well, people do that with music.
Yep.
People do that. You do that with wrestling. I mean, that's why there are those little shows that you go and attempt to work at. Not you. I mean, people in general. That's why some of those quote unquote shindy shows that are out there are good to a point, right? Because they say that it kills the business. I don't necessarily say it kills the business, because what's the business? The crowd, right?
Yep.
If there's no crowd, not really the worst thing, but what that gives you an opportunity to do is realize what works for certain individuals. Then you can test those waters on the bigger shows, right? Once you start getting ready, once you start moving forward, once you start getting to those next levels, you actually start realizing, holy crap, I've been doing it right the whole time. I just didn't know it, right? That's pretty much what it is. That switch clicks, like we said, it comes with like the character too. You find that giant hybrid monster character, right? And once you find that, it's like, wow, okay, I knew that. And then walking and chewing bubblegum, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And like I still feel like I'm still like, oh, and you said at the beginning of the show, right? Like it's one of those things where my trainer always told me that once you feel like you've learned everything in the business, get out. Like once you're
Yep.
done learning, get out. He's like, there's nothing there for you anymore. So what are you doing? And I find myself, it's something that I had another person on this podcast, and he had mentioned to me that he has all of his students have a sponge in their bag, right? And the idea isn't because there's a sponge
Perfect.
in their bag, but yeah, it's to soak up knowledge. And I think about that all the time. And I have in my bag, I have my sponge because that wasn't something I had been told. I had learned it here on the podcast. And so I started using that and taking my notebook with me everywhere and writing down notes, or I'll put them on my phone and then transfer them to my notes later or to my book later. But it's like a constant thing where it's like I'm always picking up something brand new
Yep.
to figure out.
You got to. It's because there's so much. There's so much to it, right? There's so much. And like I said, you might do something tomorrow and then not do it again for the next 2 years. Then all of a sudden you do it again and it gets a great reaction. Whether or not it's a joke, whether or not it's a move, whether or not it's just an entrance, a look, an outfit, right? And then it gets over, right? Or gets a reaction. Then you go, holy crap, why did I just waste these last 2 years? Shoot, I should have remembered to do it then. I liked when I did that. That's something you don't want to necessarily ever stop doing. You want to have those aha moments. And that's exactly what you're saying. I mean, yeah, you can say you're the greatest in something, you can say, but why? Why? You want to be the greatest. Once you become the greatest, okay, now you have everyone coming for you. And that's like that champion mentality, right? So why don't you just want to exceed that? Why don't you want to keep going? Because you're comfortable, because you're complacent? Nah, that's just silly. That's the whole fact of if you stop learning, get out. Because otherwise it's a waste of time for everybody, including yourself.
Yeah, it was one of those fear of mine of like being a 30, I think they call them like 30 milers, 40 milers.
Yep.
I never wanted to be that person. Like I had gone to shows that were like, I remember, so my trainer was like, hey, we're going to go to the show. It's in Baltimore, Maryland to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is like almost a 6-hour drive.
That's right.
It's a long ride. And he was like, hey, we're going to go to this show. So, either get in the car or you can drive, but we're going to go there and we're going to go work. And I was like, all right, cool. So I jump in the car and we would drive to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we'd go wrestle there, or we'd go to like Charleston, West Virginia. And then sometimes we would be in like a Hagerstown, Maryland, which is like an hour away from where my trainer was, or, and so we were getting out and about. And so when I had the opportunity to move to Massachusetts, I was like, this is going to be one of those crazy things that happen, and we're about to just enjoy the rest of this run and just enjoy. And like now I travel between, like Maine and Massachusetts and Rhode Island, Connecticut, obvious areas for New England. But then I still work in Pennsylvania and in Jersey and in Maryland. And, I get out and I hit the roads, and it's funny because like we talk about different people, different flavors of ice cream and different situations. I remember getting told like I wasn't serious about the business. Right. And I was like, that's crazy to me. And I thought about that over and over again. Because now I'm like, yeah. And I told him, I was like, I want you to know like how serious I am about this business. Because like, if you don't take it serious, things can happen. Like bad things can happen. And I was like, but also it just shows to you that like, oh, he moves. Like he's not just here. Like, and I don't know. It's a trip to think that.
So the 30 miler thing I want to touch on, right? The 30, 40 miler thing. That's definitely a more a more, I don't even know how to say it, an old school mentality, because nowadays, well, I mean, how's this? It's more of a pre-pandemic mentality,
Yeah.
because nowadays it's everything's digital, everything's out there, eyes on everyone. People got signed in the middle of the pandemic when shows weren't even really taking place in front of crowds. We saw what took place during that little period of time with no crowd shows for the WWE. We know things could always change, right? A lot of people hated it, a lot of people loved it, but again, that's one of those things where you go out there and try something new, and then you can figure it out. We see elements of it still in current day production, right? But the reason I don't think it's the whole getting stale thing. I don't think it's getting a huge head. That's why I don't think the 30-mile what do you say, 30 miler role is necessarily just due to the fact that people, like I said, I'm the king, I'm the best, because they're known, right? I think it's more so a detriment to the wrestlers because they don't get the experience of working these other people and these other flavors of ice cream, because all over this country you're going to find good wrestlers with same fundamentals, whether or not they're trained by a Kowalski, whether or not they're trained by Les Thatcher, whether or not they're you know what I mean, up in Canada, they have the same fundamentals. You're going to have a much stronger match, meaning a pro wrestling match, not just the spot fest. And it's okay, spot fest do have places on a show, right? We talked about that. But in general, you're not going to know what to do when you come across somebody who doesn't have those same fundamentals. You're going to be lost, and now you're going to look horrible as well. So that's the real reason, in my opinion, that all the old schoolers thought that the 30 milers, or whatever the heck they're called, really was pointless. Of course, they just didn't talk about why.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know, just like the real part is my trainer, he would always just say, find a new place that you haven't been to, and then go challenge yourself and just see what happens. And he even said it to me. So my trainer's trainer was Ruckus.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I mean, and the one thing about Sicken was like, he was like, hey, like, I want you to go find another place to go train and go work and grind and get yourself up to different places. And so I don't know, for me, it's funny because like I moved up to Massachusetts, and like I've gone to different couple schools, just kind of like peep in and kind of figure out where I want to be at and train with. But ultimately, like I kind of know where I want to go and train. Like, I mean, a couple of my friends all came from the school that you're at. So I was like, yo, this is gonna make sense to like chill out and learn. But the one thing I think was really important to me too, and I had talked about this with you too at BWA, was I want the stamp. Like, that's the biggest part. Like, I want to earn the respect, and the stamp is what matters to me more than anything else.
I mean, what you're doing already will earn you your respect, right? It's going to. That seal of approval, that stamp. I mean, ultimately, that doesn't necessarily matter in the big picture, and we all know this. But becoming part of or learning pieces of the lineage, of course, like you were saying, that is something that is admirable, and it is noticeable. You can see somebody in another part of the country, and you're like, oh wow, they're trained in Massachusetts. There's a certain way that a couple again, name dropping, but don't really want to. I've had a couple students who have had WWE tryouts in the past. They've done other tryouts as well. They've been on TV, off TV. They're one that's still on TV down in a certain area of Florida, right? But one thing that I've heard from them from their tryouts is something that gets said to them without them looking at the sheet, without them knowing who you are. They know that you're from New England, more so Massachusetts, just based off how you run your ropes.
Yeah.
And they say it's the only place that still runs the ropes that way. And I'm not going to give away too much of that. And we're going to leave it to the rest of the world to understand what that means. But there are those small identifiers. And I get it. I get it 100%. And it's just something that's going to come along naturally. So I appreciate everything you say. And of course, you know, like I mentioned to you in person, I would love to have you come in and hang, as you said, and learn some stuff, and we'll get that moving. New year, like I said, we've got some big things hoping.
Hell yeah. So listen, I'm gonna move this over to my favorite part of the 3 Count podcast,
All right.
which is the 3 Count podcast 10 count questions. This is how it works, Mr. Douglas.
2. I'm ready. Let's get that 10 count.
I'm gonna fire off 10 questions at you rapid fast, and whatever your answer is, that is your answer.
Oh man, let's get it.
We're gonna put on the imaginary timer for added pressure. Bing. And in the words of my favorite commentator, Mike Goldberg, here we go. SmackDown or Raw?
Raw.
Favorite movie?
Never ending story.
Let's go. I was just talking to my daughter about that. Marvel or DC?
Oh, Marvel.
Favorite cartoon?
Mask.
I like that. Waffles or pancakes?
Raw. English muffin.
Okay, I like that. Favorite TV show?
Saved by the Bell.
That's a great pick. I know somebody else who loves that show.
Yeah, okay, we're good.
I don't know. Someone just says rub my belly. That's all it is. Apple or Android?
I'm an Android person, but stuck in an Apple right now.
Favorite podcast?
We're right here.
That's right. The 3 count. Nominate one person that you want to see on this podcast.
Let's get the hard work heroes on this podcast. It's 2 people, but 1 team. Let's hear them.
Yeah. I like both those guys too, so they know. Last but not least, my favorite question to ask every single person that comes on this podcast: favorite curse word. This is not a clean podcast, by the way. We just been talking clean, and anybody who watches the show knows it.
My daughter's going to be watching it, so I really, I can't really be dropping
Listen.
that bomb. But there you go. Yeah, Boston, man. What the?
You know what's so crazy is I've had a lot of people like they'll curse around. They'll curse by accident in front of my daughter, she's 13, and I'm like, listen. Even when she was 5, people would apologize. I'm like, listen, her dad is from military. Her mom is from Massachusetts. There's nothing that she hasn't heard that we've said already.
Listen, I mean, the F-bomb is the F-bomb, man. It works for every single situation, every type. It could be an insult. It could be an expression of happiness. It could be a verb. It could be a noun. You can take it how you want.
You can put it on every word in a sentence.
Huh?
You can put it as every word in a sentence.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, I think that's the winner there.
Yeah, I like it. Well, those are all my questions for you. I appreciate you coming on for the conversation. The last thing I would like you to do is to let our listeners and our viewers know where they can find you.
I mean, you can find me obviously on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Beau Douglas. Check out the Belltime Club Training Center. That will be switching up a little bit in the new year, but of course, check it out right on Facebook as well on the Belltime Club. You can find us on YouTube, Belltime Club Training Center. Check out all our old footage, and I mean, just do a quick Google search, Beau, BEAUDOUGLAS, just like it's right there on your screen.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, well, he told you where you can find him. He even told you about this school, so you guys need to go research that. Check it out, Google it if you need to. But like every great part of a wrestling match, we gotta take this home, because this is the 3 Count Podcast presents Now Entering, and I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you out that mountain called wrestling. And as your Sherpa, you know I always say it's not about me, it's about who's entering. So who's entering? you see him right there, the dynasty himself, Beau Douglas, and you guys know what to do. Tune in to the next episode and be there, or you're legitimately following us on all of our social media platforms. You're subscribed to our YouTube channel. You're following us on Spotify. You're checking us out on Amazon Music. You're even listening to us on that dumb app with the stupid jingle that goes iHeartRadio or whatever it is. You're checking out our merch on ProWrestlingTees.com, or even checking us out on ForYourWear.com. You're telling your mom about us, your dad about us, your uncle about us, your brothers, your aunties, your brothers, your sisters, your best friends, and your enemies, because we love haters too. You're doing all that stuff, or really you're just kind of waiting for this episode to end. You're waiting for the outro, and then you're choosing another episode to listen to. Kawaii. What's going on? It is Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. And what we need from you guys is to kind of show some support, right? We want you guys to go to our YouTube channel at the 3 Count Podcast, go on to our Twitch channel, 3 Count Pod, or even our Facebook page, 3 Count Podcast, and just give us a like, follow, subscribe, even give us a comment, right? Do all that cool stuff. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your enemies, right? Or you can even come talk to us and just chat us up, right? Find us on Twitter at 3Count_pod. Find us on IG and on TikTok at 3 Count Pod. Go ahead and leave us those comments. We want to hear from all of you guys. We're going to keep putting on videos and stuff like that. We want to keep making this content better, so we want your guys' support. Also, if you guys want to, go support us at ProWrestlingTees.com/the 3 Count Podcast, or even find us on ForYourWear.com. Give us the support. Show us your guys' love, because we want to give it right back to y'all. So, in the meantime, between time, love y'all.